Mm-mm. Hello and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have quite a show in store for you, so sit tight, hold on, and we'll be right back. All right, ladies, we are here as usual, our regular Tuesday 8:30, and we have the wonderful Katrina.
Hi.
We have the awesome Tangela.
Good evening, everybody.
All right, and the terrific Shanetta.
Hey.
All right, guys, and tonight we have a special treat because we have two additional guests. So I'm going to bring them in one by one. First, we have Jay Hamilton, attorney extraordinaire.
How you doing?
All right, and we have a friend of mine, Taiwan Vereen.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Yes, say hi. Okay, so tonight we're gonna kind of do a mashup of a couple of different topics. Hey Richard, thanks for joining us. Oh, and Ephraim said the good Reverend Dr. J. Hamilton Esquire. Hey Ephraim, thanks for joining us. Okay, guys, so we're gonna take it easy on you tonight, but we are going to hit a few topics. Taiwan, I'm going to start with you. Because I want you to talk about the lady in Long Island with the trash.
Okay.
So,
Jennifer.
yes, tell everybody what that whole scenario was and explain what part you had in it.
Okay, so there was a lady, she was a black single mother. She lived in Lynbrook, Long Island, and she's a nurse, and she saved her life savings to get this house. So she was able to buy the house, and little did she know it was like a house of horrors just because of her neighbors. So her neighbors were super racist. She put up like surveillance cameras around her house, and they would be seen putting dog feces on her yard. They would walk around the house and yell racial epithets at her with their guns out. They put like a dead squirrel on her lawn one time, and apparently they had some sort of pull within the town because they even had it to where she wasn't even getting her garbage picked up. So she had literally months worth of garbage that would not be picked up. Everyone else's garbage would be picked up, hers wouldn't. So she put a note on her, a bright yellow note on her door, explaining the hell that she was in, and it got noticed. And I was on a Facebook page on Explorer and saw it in its early stages and tried to help out with it.
Okay, and try to help out, meaning what?
So okay, so behind the scenes, obviously we wanted to have a show of force. So there was a lot of talking behind the scenes. One of the people who were involved had a connection with 100 blacks in law enforcement. Initially, we just wanted to go be out there, show the neighbors that she wasn't alone because she was alone. She's a single parent. She doesn't have siblings, so she's initially alone. But we wanted to show that she wasn't. So we had someone organized 100 blacks in law enforcement to go out there, and then there was a few other people who did shifts. So 24 hours a day, someone was there. So from that point, her neighbors stopped with the nonsense. They stopped flashing their guns. They stopped throwing the feces on the lawn. They even stopped speaking to her, but the damage was already done at that point. So we needed to take it a step further. We had to organize a march, and we got a good amount of people. We got the attention of News 12. We got the attention of Channel 7 and Channel 2 as well. And we marched through the neighborhoods. We wanted them to know that she's not alone. She won't be alone. And from that, we networked. Someone was able to, do her yard over, which beautified her yard. And we let some of the people in the neighborhood know, like, this is a reflection of all of you. So we don't just want it to be us marching. If you don't agree with it, we need you to come out as well. So we even had some of her neighbors come out and march and say that they didn't agree with it. It wasn't them. And eventually, the Nassau County Police Department had no choice but to get involved, because it took off. It got the news attention and it took off. One of her neighbors had to eventually be arrested because the video clearly showed him displaying a gun, and he wasn't licensed to have the gun. So he got arrested. And from that point, she started to be able to enjoy her house. And even then, there's still someone there, not 24 hours anymore, but she still has a presence to let them know she's not alone. She's never going to be alone.
Wow. And so this was what, 2019, 2020?
2020. It was in the midst of COVID. We was out there with our masks on. It was hot, but we had to do what we had to do.
Okay, and so what was that whole experience like? I mean, we grew up in New York. We went to school. We didn't really experience a high amount of racism. So now to be, over 40 and experience something so blatant, what was that like?
I mean, for me, it was a plethora of different emotions, because it's like, on one hand, you're so happy for someone who can afford a house in Long Island, because the
Right.
taxes are through the roof. So you're happy for someone. She's a single mother. She's a nurse. So you're super happy. And then you you have the audacity to treat someone this way just because she's Black. Then it goes up another level, because it's like, and you're connected to the town to where they're not even picking her garbage up, which she pays taxes for that service. So it was a ton of different emotions. And I think that's why the show of force had to happen immediately. It couldn't be a bunch of different emails going back and forth and time wasted. It had to happen very, very fast. And it did. I think after everything was done and the neighbor was arrested, it was almost like that aha moment, like, aha. See, this is what you didn't think would ever happen. And now look at you. You're going to have a record now. This is not just going to go away. And it's not going to. We found out that the person who had the house before her, which was also a female, but she wasn't a single female, they went through something similar.
Wow.
They eventually moved for similar reasons. They was only in that house for 2 years, from what we understand, and they moved. So, the emotions are all over the place, but the end result is a good feeling. We all did it from our hearts. No one asked for a dime. People volunteered their time. I live an hour from her. I was at her house every other day. And so was a bunch of other people. I met people who I didn't know, and we would run into each other out there and just, give the head nod. All right, you leaving, I'm on. It was a great feeling in the end. And her house again got beautified. There was gardeners who volunteered their time. Someone painted the front of her house because it did need some work. It was a fixer-upper. People came together and really, really looked out for her. Her name is Jennifer, by the way.
Okay. So was there like a level of pride in the community or in just being Black at that point?
It absolutely is. It's like because it caught the attention of different news outlets. We wanted it to do that because we want to say that we know that there's other Jennifers out there. We know that.
Right.
And we want to stand with all of the Jennifers once we find out that they're in similar situations. The saying that there's strength in numbers.
Right.
That was on full display. It was on full display. We couldn't have got that done with one or two people. It took a bunch of people to come together to get that done. And I will say it wasn't just Black people, but Black people were at the forefront of it.
Right. Okay. Anybody else have any questions for him?
I
How
just had one question. Is there any fear of retaliation? I know you all said we started at 24 hours and now it's not quite 20. Do you think that, that presence has been enough to deter these neighbors from continuing or try to retaliate against her?
I don't think the fear of anything physical is there anymore. I think when you deal with people who can do this to a single mother, you know that they're dealing with their own insecurities for once. But once that show of power is there, at any moment they know all she has to do is send out an email and we're back in full force. They don't want that anymore. We took their neighborhoods over. You know what I'm saying? When 100 Blacks in law enforcement came, they didn't ride bikes over there. They came in big Black SUVs and loud cars, and they literally took over the neighborhood. Now, obviously, we don't want to take over people's neighborhoods because you guys pay taxes in your neighborhood and we want you to enjoy it just like we want her to enjoy it. But we have to let you know that, for one, we are protecting our women, and for two, we can be there in the blink of an eye. Once they saw the force, there was no more aggression. The aggression left. It proved that they're cowards. They only did that to her. If it was a male like me, it wouldn't have been the same aggression. It wouldn't have been the same aggression. So we don't have that fear. She hasn't had a single incident since we left. Not a single incident. She comes and goes. She has no issues there. Now, from what I understand recently, the neighbors who was giving her all the problems have put their house up for sale.
Wow.
good riddance.
Absolutely. Good riddance.
Okay, so I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit. You were saying, you talked about the show of force and how the community rallied together, to kind of be there for her. And I know this may be kind of stretching a little bit, but so I want to talk about Ma'Khia Bryant and what happened to her. And so from what I've seen, I feel like most of all her community failed her. Her community of people. When I think about, the fact that her father was present at the time because he had arrived. I think some other family showed up afterwards. The fact that she was even living in a foster home, and her family was near. I feel like her community of people, as well as the officer, failed her. So I would like to hear just you guys, if you're comfortable, I want to hear you guys' opinion on the scenario. And do you feel like it was a breakdown in her community that led to it, as well as not totally removing responsibility from the officer, because we all have some level of responsibility. But I feel like the breakdown in her community put her in that position.
Well, I spoke a lot. Let the brother speak.
So this is interesting because as an attorney, we always look at it kind of from the perspective of when the officer and the person meet, right? Mm-hmm. And the situation that has the officer called out is viable, right? If there's a disturbance, people are taught to call the police arrive, see the disturbance. I guess the discrepancy that I'm trying hard to digest is, why is it that when the officers respond to situations with Black people, it always results in lethal force? Absolutely. I'm not saying that there wasn't a degree of force that could have been used or should have been used. I'm saying that you've got utility belts with mace, pepper spray, tasers, rubber bullets sometimes, as opposed to your other side of the belt that's got your lethal force. And I don't understand why every time, no matter what the city or the state, whenever there's Black people involved, it just automatically seems like the trigger is lethal force. I don't think it was a lethal force designated situation. I definitely, hearing the backstory, well, I guess we're going to find out and hold all of what's going on. But hearing the snippets of the backstory that I hear, I see community breakdowns that you were describing from the perspective of she was being bullied.
Right.
I think that, we can all say how we would react in a situation where we be bullied, but when the tables are turned, it's not fun when the rabbit has the gun, right? So when the tables are turned, I think this was an opportunity for her to say, look, nobody has protected me from this bullying. I'm
Right.
going to protect myself. And it just so happens that this happened at the same time that the officer is getting out of the car here. My last thing I'll say is, we are always concerned when it comes to policing because of the fact that it always results in lethal force. And it shows us that it really doesn't matter whether the person was sitting in their own house eating ice cream, whether the person was just trying to buy something from the store and allegedly had a $20 bill that wasn't real, whether the person was, trying to run away or get away from an officer that was acting some kind of way. We've seen this story so many times in so many different places that the concern seems to be that we have given police a license to be judge, jury, and executioner in the span of a moment, and given them the ability to veil themselves of liability by strictly saying either I was scared for my life or I was protecting somebody else from imminent bodily danger and fear of their life. And there's no accountability, right? So what we've been trying to do this whole time was get accountability for situations that happen, but it becomes increasingly difficult because you also realize there's a faction of people in this country who believe that being black means you're guilty, right? Being black means you don't get due process rights. Being black means that if the officer killed you, oops, my bad, it happened. You shouldn't have been doing X, Y, and Z. And I am fearful for this case in particular because we had just seen a record level of unity after Derek Chauvin got convicted, where we saw a stage with civil rights leaders of the past. We saw Jesse Jackson. We saw Al Sharpton. We saw Ben Crump. We saw the family of George Floyd. We saw the family of Breonna Taylor. Like all these people coming together, black people, beautiful black people on a platform coming together, published all over the world through media. And before the day was over, there were 4 shootings of black people, 4 killings of black people the next day. But why does the media pick Ma'Khia Bryant over any of the other people who got shot? And I think they did that because they knew that it would divide us. There are some of us, our own people, who say, well, she shouldn't have been stabbing them. Right. So you get shot when you stab somebody. All the unity, all the work we've done to establish that our lives should have some degree of sanctity and be protected from ultimate deadly force is washed away in the span of one piece of a videotape that causes everybody to reach for their polls and say, you know what, this is a different situation, whatever. So my only focus for this case is trying to ensure that we are universal and have solidarity behind the concept of just because the police comes to a scene where black people are at, that alone does not create the need for lethal force.
Okay.
This was a tricky one for me. I do feel like we are policed differently from our white counterparts, and I go into most situations knowing that we are looked at differently. I think this entire thing could have and should have been, it should have been deaded from the father. When you look at the video from the time the police officer got out the car to the time he shoots, it's very fast. It's a few seconds. But one of the things that you notice is you see him kicking someone. The same energy that you're using to kick someone, you should have been grabbing your daughter. You should have been grabbing people, separating people. She should have never been let out the house. It's so many should haves that could have prevented her from dying. I feel as if the adults, mainly the male adults present, failed her.
Right.
The shots were excessive. We know that. It's no way the same scenario with a bunch of white faces result in 4 shots, send a mass. It doesn't happen. It's not on record. It just doesn't happen. But as a black male, even if it's one present, which we saw, that situation could have been de-escalated just with him raising his voice. That's your daughter. And even though she's in a foster home, there's still a level of respect that she'll have for you for life. Raise your voice, put the knife down. Even if you have to curse, put the effing knife down. You raise your voice, you get your daughter under some sort of control, back in the house until the police officer comes. So I feel like he failed her specifically. He failed her. And then the police officer, which is a whole different ball game. He 100% failed her. I don't feel like he had the other person's best interest at heart, because if you do, you don't fire 4 times at such close proximity. So I don't feel like that can be used. It'll probably be justified. I'll never in my life post, and I've seen so many posts where people were quick to say that it's justified. It's justified. Justified doesn't mean that it's right. It means that it's going to be legal, but it doesn't mean that it's right. So I feel like she was failed by her father, who was right there. I got to put it on him. I'm a little hard. I'm a father. I put a little more emphasis on black fathers, and I feel like he really could have shut that down.
Right. Ladies?
I think I was unaware of some of the details that we just kind of talked about or kind of put out there. This is my first time hearing that the guy that was in the frame or in the shot was her father, which is a bit shocking. And I kind of have to agree on that side of that. I feel like it could have been de-escalated prior to the police officer even getting out of his car. For me, I just feel like when I look at these situations and they're all beginning to kind of be the same, and it's like time and time again, it's the same situation. Black and brown people are being murdered, and it's happening every day around us, whether we see it in the media or not. It's happening, and then we see it a month later. We see it 2 months later. They don't release the footage until I guess until it's reviewed by whomever or whatever the cases may be. And I feel like there needs to be a better value of our lives. There needs to be more value placed on how to de-escalate these situations the same way situations are de-escalated and handled for white people. I'm not going to say other races, because it's other races too this is happening to, and not strictly just us, as the 13-year-old boy in Chicago. And there are so many other ways to de-escalate situations that we're clearly seeing when we see the body cam footage where there's a white person that's being pulled over. They're doing the same things. We talked about last week the guy that was pulled over, gun visible in the vehicle, and he pretty much demanded and told them what he was not going to do, what they were not going to do, and then he proceeded to leave the scene. So when you see situations like that, and you see that comes up just as much as the videos that we're seeing of us come up, I feel like there needs to be more training for police officers to preserve our lives. I don't know how that happens. I don't know what you need to organize to make that happen, but there needs to be more value placed on the Black life.
In addition, I think what I'm seeing a lot of is we have children who they're calling or deeming as young lady or, this young man. This is a child.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? These are children. And if they were to see our children as their children, it would be a whole different scenario. You don't come out, you know what I'm saying, and come out your car and you're looking at children and you start treating them like adults. Yeah. And if you were to see, a bunch of white kids and these are our children. These are children. Right. This is how children behave. This is how all children behave.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not all of a sudden it's Black children, so they're criminals. When it's your children, they had a bad day. or, they're acting out. All children act out. All children have bad days, and they should all be treated and seen in the same way. This whole, putting this, criminal or adult, label on children, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I think that the media also doesn't help the situation, because it seems like the media can lead or kind of skew perception based on what's, I guess, convenient at the time. So if they want to vilify the victims,
right,
then that's what they're going to bring up. Like even, with George Floyd, why were we talking about his past?
Yes.
Why were we talking about, what was in his system? So why is this some sort of justification as to, why he was killed? So I think sometimes the media tries to paint certain pictures, that will almost desensitize us to the fact that these are human lives.
right.
So it's, sometimes I kind of shy away from even watching the news. I'm like Shanetta, I didn't know the details only because I just couldn't stomach it. Another one, and you don't know. I think, like I said, they try to desensitize us by putting certain images almost to make us, a decisioner, or someone who decides someone's worth, to say, okay, well, she deserved it, or she should have been doing this.
Yeah.
When in reality, it shouldn't have happened.
Absolutely. So we have a question. He said, how do we prevent situations like this from happening?
You come up with all the answers that you want to. We could say, oh, we need to teach our kids this. Oh, we need to make sure when the police arrive, this is how we behave. This is what we do. But we're seeing time and time again that it doesn't matter in some of these situations what you do. I was just saying earlier today, I have a neighbor and we're both Black, and they're a little disgruntled about some parking situations in front of our homes that we own, right? So neighbors get a little, crazy act. But one particular time, and I'm still a little bitter about this, they decided that they were going to call the police about parking in front of our houses. Now, we're both Black families. So when that happened, the officer arrived. I talked to him. He told me I didn't have to move the car. It was not really blocking their driveway. It was no big deal. It was whatever. So now I'm really not moving the car in a lot of situations, because now I'm like, oh, you want to call the police. But I was so annoyed. And even today, they were like kind of being petty and blocking my driveway. And I was like, but I wouldn't even dare call the police back on them just to kind of, play tit for tat with them. I'm not going to call the police because I have a fear for their life as well as mine if I happen to call the police. It's not going to go to that level. It's not that serious to me. Like, okay, if your mail comes to my house and, I'm not going to bring it across the street to you, because that's my level of petty. My level of petty is not calling the police on you, though. I might keep your mail, but I'm not going to call the police on you. But every time I think about that incident and how they did it, and they did it when my son was home alone, and he's 18. So he's talking to a police officer by himself. No. Anything could have happened.
All right.
So that bothers me because he's in his home. His car is not bothering anybody. But the mere fact that we can't call the police, the mere fact that we can't even feel comfortable enough, even if I'm in a good area and I feel like, our police won't do that out here. I don't know that. Right. So because I don't know that, I'm not even making that move. Like, I'm not calling the police unless I see somebody getting murdered at this point, pretty much. Like, and at that point, I'm not really so sure that I will. I might have to call somebody else. I don't really know how I'm going to respond. But because you just don't know, it's not even enough training in the world that we could give to our kids, our children, our young people, our adults, our husbands, to have them prepared for a police encounter, because you don't know what you're going to encounter.
Could be the last. I just real quick, I feel like the reality is America at its core, at its foundation, is just built on racism, and what we see now is not a product of a few individuals. It's a system, and systems don't just stop working. So to say, it's easy to say, how do we prevent it from happening? It's a system in place, and the system is working as designed. What we're seeing is only a result of there being cameras everywhere, but we've always been gunned down. We have always, always, always been gunned down by police. They have always been able to go home and sleep in their bed, as we have to defend our people, possibly. I'm sorry, that's a word didn't get out, but we have to defend ours after they're dead. They look for the worst pictures to put out in the media of our people. They don't look for the graduation pictures. They look for the worst of the worst pictures. And that starts to shape public perception. So you have people who, knowing in their right mind that the person did nothing wrong and should be alive, but because the pictures on the screen starts to get into their head, they automatically start thinking bad things about it. This is a part of a system. The system itself has to be destroyed. And I know over the summer we heard defund, defund, defund. People hear defund and they think no more police. That isn't what defund means. That isn't what defund means. We do need more oversight. We need outside oversight, because when you have police investigating police, you will have people back at work before you can snap a finger. We have to get some sort of outside oversight that can hold these police officers accountable. And until we get that, there will still be black bodies dead on the ground. It's so unfortunate, but that's the reality of it. We'll continue to see this. And we're just seeing it more because it's being shared at light speed. You know what I'm saying? We all have our social medias. Facebook will allow you to share a black man getting gunned down, but put some music on your video that you don't own and they shut it down. Right. You know what I'm saying? So even the media is a huge part of it, a huge part of it. And going back to the justice part that we were speaking about earlier, the George Floyd verdict, I don't consider that justice. They did the right thing, but I don't necessarily consider that justice. What I would consider justice is new laws. If we don't get new laws, no justice has been done, in my opinion.
Right.
So I can piggyback on a couple of those things. So one thing I think is important for people to understand, there is a George Floyd Act that has been grounded by Mitch McConnell and the people in the Senate, and it hasn't been posed for a vote. Part of it is increasing kind of these oversights of police departments that we've been talking about, and you can probably understand the reason why they don't want that passed. Like you said, it's a system that works the way that the engineers who designed it wanted to work. That's right. I think there were a lot of lessons to learn from the Derek Chauvin case. I think one of the lessons that I hope people learn is the importance of having black people in high places. And what I mean by that is, when this case first came out, there was an attorney who looked at the case and said, oh, there's nothing wrong here. But lo and behold, Keith Ellison happened to be the attorney general for the state of Minnesota. And Keith Ellison said, no, we're going to look into this. And Keith Ellison happens to be black, right? On top of that, there were police officers who testified against Derek Chauvin, including the chief of police, who happens to be black. Right. There were people who answered the jury summons and actually were on jury trial, and 6 of them happened to be black, right? So it makes a huge difference when we have a real jury of our peers and we have community members who get it. I do want to give some accolades. You know, I grew up doing criminal defense work, so it's hard for me to praise the state. But in this case, I do want to give some accolades to the state, because what we've also seen is states who don't feel comfortable, like states attorneys who don't feel comfortable prosecuting the police officers for several reasons. One, oftentimes those officers are the same people they rely on for testimony and evidence in a number of their other cases that they're trying to get convictions on. So now it calls into question all of your convictions, which we know is an issue and should be questioned in the first place. The second part of this is, I saw a state that was committed to the idea of an officer being held responsible. If anybody saw the video, there really was nothing else to show. You could have Johnny Cochran, you could have me, you could have Thurgood Marshall. You're not winning that case. It's a video with you with a knee on this guy's neck for 10 minutes. and you got half the jury is black. That was doomed, right? So I think those are important things that we can control. We can go to jury duty. We can have, train our kids to say, go to law school or do this or do that to be part of the community. Now, getting back to Taiwan's point, I think it's very important that we as black people teach our kids exactly what he just said. This system's root is racism. I've said it before. Racism is kind of America's currency. We don't make things anymore. We just maintain standards based on race. And I think about this kind of in a historic context where we're taught in school about the founding fathers. How many of them were black?
No.
0, right? And then when you look at the founding fathers, most of them not just were white people, they were affluent white people. They were people who were white collar professionals. And what they did was they set up a system where they screwed over poor white people and screwed over all minorities, right? And that continues to this day. So that if you make a poor white man feel like he can be one of you, he will always vote against his interests because he wants to feel like he has a shot at sitting at that table. You know what Hamilton's about? I want to be in the room, right? I always have a shot to be in the room as long as I'm, in line with what you all want. The problem is we're also seeing that there's changing demographics going on. And we're also seeing that black people are beyond fed up. We've been putting up with this stuff since before there was an America, right? Policing in and of itself was a concept that didn't get developed until slavery. And it got developed for the purpose of returning escaped slaves to their masters. So there was never any recognition of black humanity in the concept, in the very founding of policing in general. And everything that we've done where we say, well, maybe if we train them, they won't kill us. It didn't work. Maybe if we make police officers who look like us, it didn't work. And I think you have to go back to kind of the root of the issue. I'm not saying that all police officers are bad. I think I've had the pleasure of meeting some really good ones. The problem is that good police officers also feel like it is career suicide to say anything against a bad officer.
It is.
So they're not going to say anything. They're going to protect their job. Meanwhile, the community gets ravaged. And we are left with a media system whose ratings largely boost when there's a black person dead on the 6 o'clock news. So when we tune in and we share and we say, okay, we're galvanizing support behind this, that's making their numbers do this, right?
Yep.
So they're going to keep doing it. They're going to keep sharing it. One, it emphasizes to the overall power structure, this is all you're good for. This is who you are in America. On the other hand, it boosts their numbers, so their advertisers want to spend money. They're going to make money. Everybody wins except for us, right? So the issue comes down to, how do you fix the system? I don't know that you necessarily can fix it without doing what Taiwan says. I think you have to dismantle the system. The problem is, in order to dismantle the system, you have to be in a position of power to do the dismantling. And we don't have that either, right? So we're kind of screwed here, right? And I say this as an attorney who believes in the fundamental principles of justice and equality and fairness and all of that. That's not sold here, right? Like, that's not sold here. What's sold here is opportunity to exist within the system. And that means that we have to do our part. We can't sit out on votes, be it for national elections, state elections, local elections. We have to be informed citizens because our kids' lives depend on that. Mm-hmm. We have to participate. Is it going to change if we all went out and voted 100%? Does that change the political demographics? Probably not. But I will argue that it certainly made sure that Donald Trump wasn't president again, right? So there are things that we can do. And then the last thing I'll say is, I am a big advocate for Black people in America in general to leave the country for a vacation or something, because when you go to other places, particularly like African nations, Caribbean nations, when you go to other places and you get to take off the target for a little bit and just be you and live and enjoy, it changes your whole perspective. Half the stuff that we do over here is backwards and we're not supposed to be doing in the first place, right? So you need a break. You can't deal with this 24/7 and expect that you're going to come out unscathed or that your mentality isn't going to take some lumps from seeing this. So you need a break where your kids can be kids, where you can be you and enjoy yourself and enjoy life, and then armor up and come back in here to be able to do battle with a system that already has pegged you as an enemy. And I think the way that we historically have done this battle is we've said we're going to maximize our ability to get educated. We're going to maximize our ability to unify and be galvanized behind certain issues that impact all of us. And we're going to try to live the best lives we can in the midst and in spite of this system that has been created. And I can't emphasize to you guys enough, every time I look at where we have come from, we look at this and we say 1863 to now was like 100 years, like 150 plus years, right? It seems like that's a long time, but you have to think about it. Countries in Africa have been in existence since before Christ, right? They've had their issues. They've worked through issues. They've been colonized. They fought off colonizers. They established all kinds of things going on. Some things just take time and progress, but look at where you are now compared to where your great grandparents were. And you are the dream. You are the hope that they could only imagine. So think about where your great grandkids are going to be. You just want to make sure that you're doing your part so that they don't have to deal with all the crap that you had to deal with, at least full force. They'll have money set aside or a company set aside where they can do their own thing, or they'll have a place to live where they don't have to beg anybody for anything, right? Because in America, the people who get screwed, no matter what your color is always going to be poor people. And as long as you can keep your folks from being poor, then they have a fighting chance to be able to stand against everything they have to deal with.
Okay.
I'm not going behind that.
Okay, so we're gonna shift just a little bit. So we know that African Americans, we make up, Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's about 13%. Okay. And if I'm not wrong, Asians or make up about 5%, somewhere around there. Okay, but so I saw recently, they have passed the Asian hate bill.
The COVID-19 hate act for the Asians.
Right. I mean, I like how they slapped that COVID on it to try to make it, to try to kind of camouflage it to make it look like something that it kind of really isn't.
Well, I mean, they've only been getting hate since COVID came out, which is just about a year.
Well, they only been getting hate since the president started.
It is.
The former president.
Yes.
This was all a
when
result
COVID came out, yes.
Right. Well, this is really a result of him. Right. So it's been a year. So 1 year of them being, and not even as, 1 year of them being slighted or mistreated or however you want to say. And already we have
A bill.
this bill. Meanwhile, how long have we as people, like you said, been enduring this? How does that make you feel when you hear that? Because when I saw that they already passed it and it's already like a done deal, it's like, really? Like, how they just get to the front of the line? How does that?
So I want to be clear. This is a very interesting topic here. I always try to separate the bill's kind of street alias versus the actual wording of the bill, right?
Okay.
What has happened is actually very unique because that bill doesn't just help the Asian community. It helps everybody, right? What it does is empowering the attorney general to, again, begin setting up not just hotlines for people to be able to call when there's discrimination, but also to be able to do studies to determine how many people in what racial categories are being discriminated or preyed upon against by everybody, law enforcement agencies or whatever. Now, the reason that they named it what it is because the people who came behind it to fight for it were the Asian community. And it's an actual slick ploy because what they have done is they have galvanized support for a group of people that the folks who are in charge in Washington don't necessarily have a beef with, right? And they've used it almost as a Trojan horse to expand protections for everybody. So if anything, this is an opportunity for us to take advantage of the same legislation they've got, similar to how they've been taking advantage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, all the things that we've been doing where we're historically the sacrificial lamb for everybody else's benefit. It doesn't really give law enforcement or anybody that much power to really do anything yet. And so typically with politics is you get the bill passed and then you revisit to give it teeth, right? Right now they don't really have the teeth. They just got the ability to study. We've got things like reparation commissions who are studying. So that doesn't do anything. It don't mean you get reparations, right? That means that somebody's looking at it. And the study may take, sometimes in politics, the study is what gets people to shut up for a long time anyway. So if we do the study, while we're looking at it, you're going to wait and see our results. Maybe it takes 100 years for us to get to the bottom of it, right? It's politics. It goes back to Taiwan's original point. It's all about a rigged system. We live in a country with a rigged system. And in order for minorities to get anywhere, we have to put together these coalitions of everybody to get anything. And the coalition is all about timing. So the timing right now was for the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. They struck while the iron was hot on COVID, and this has increased to get them where they are with this particular hate bill. But if you look at the bill, it doesn't say just for Asian American or Pacific Islander communities. So that's our end. We have to use that and weaponize it for our protection as well.
Realistically, do you think that's a real possibility, though?
Do you think we could?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I think, attorneys, this is what we do, right? So I'm going to find anything in the law that's going to be a protection or an effort to help, and I'm going to use it because laws don't get to discriminate in America. The people discriminate, but the laws don't. So as long as we can use it and find an applicable situation, particularly if you have somebody who can make impact litigation on a grand scale that gets publicized, then it changes how that law is used. And the reason I say that is because when you look at things like the Fair Housing Act, the Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, even though we know that was for Black people and done from the work of Black people, who does it benefit? Everybody.
Not us. Right. Yeah, right.
So you just have to have people who are going to continue to fight for our community and make sure that those laws are applied equally. But in America, you can't make a law that discriminates based on race. You can't. That's the flaw.
I think where our opportunity is the knowledge and making sure that we are educated on the law and not just what we hear.
Absolutely.
So I think that's where, I think perhaps sometimes they're counting on the fact that, okay, but we won't, they won't know or they won't do the due diligence. So like you mentioned, that means, we have to have enough of us educated either through school or through, just doing your homework so that we know how and what is available to us, what protections, are available to us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think part of the problem with that is that we don't, we take things sometimes and don't speak up about them. So something could happen with one of us, and versus us telling someone that can help us find the information that we need to handle certain situations in our communities, we just deal with it. And because we deal with it and we swallow the tough pill, we don't have the access that we need because we're just taking it. And it's just like, well, I'm good. I'm strong. I'm okay. I can handle it. I'll take it. And it happens again and again and again. And not enough of us are speaking up about what's occurring. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, that happened to me too. When you see it, with somebody else, oh, that's been happening to me for years. And we've never spoken up enough to know that there was a way to even attempt to deal with it.
Absolutely. And
this bill to me, when I saw that it passed, I laughed. And I think about America when you think about like white population growth, where someone dies, a baby is born. Well, more white people are dying than babies are being born. So the white people in power, they don't just look for themselves. They look generations ahead because they want the power to remain.
Right.
So when you know that you're not producing enough babies and more you guys are dying than babies are coming into the world, how do you keep that power? You have to latch on to another group that kind of has the same mindset as you. So when I think about Asians, and not all, when I think about some Asians, you'll have Asians come to America, not speaking a word of English, and know that they don't like black people in a day. They just know, I don't like you. We haven't had a negative interaction with you, but they don't like us for whatever reason. That's someone that the white power structure needs to grasp, because that way we get them in, we keep the power longer. So they give them a little bill and that welcomes you in. Look, we're protecting you. So years down the line, you're going to relate to us. You're not going to look at anyone else and say that, you know what, their situation over there, it's not right. You're going to look at what we gave you, and that right there, even though they don't use bribery, but it's a little bit of a bribery, it's going to rope you right in. And that bill, to me, even though I didn't read it, because in all honesty, most of these bills be thousands of pages and most black people don't even read them. I didn't read it. But the fact that I knew what it was specifically made for, even though we may fall under that umbrella and get some protections, it wasn't made for us. It was made specifically for them. You know what I'm saying? I just looked at it like, this is America. This is what America does. And at its core, it's racist. You know what I'm saying? It's built on the power structure of white America, in my opinion.
Okay, so we have a question. So where do we start getting the power? Is it political or financial? Like, where do we start? Do we start with, who we're voting into office, or should we be starting with securing and maximizing the black dollar? Like, where should we start? Where can we start?
All of the above.
Right.
However you can. Like we said, making sure that we are voted in absolutely every election possible.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe in supporting the black dollar and making sure that our communities are supported. And I think there's ways that we can do that. And I think on the surface, well, for me, I've been of the mindset, well, I'm only one person. What am I going to do? Of course I vote, but looking in the overarching issue, how can I play a part in that? And there's really, different ways that we can be a part of the solution by making a conscious effort every day to be educated, to support, to be intentional about what we do, what we say, what we support, what do we publicize, what do we share. I don't think it's just one thing. I think we have to do a lot of things in tandem.
We gotta spend money financially, more financially sound. We waste tons of our money. Where you have other groups that pool their money and vote as a base, we're wasting money. If I live in a small town, again, the word bribery comes up, but in politics, it's lobbying. We don't even have lobbyists, because the money that we spend on such stupid, frivolous things is what we could be using, not to bribe, but to get people, political people, to lobby for us. We don't have that. So we rather spend our money on symbols of freedom when we live with our mom and we want to buy the luxury car. So we rather have the Mercedes Benz, as opposed to using that same money and getting a lobbyist to lobby for the needs in your community. You know what I'm saying? And I just use Mercedes-Benz as a piece of material, but you can insert anything in there. We waste our money on a ton of stuff. We have no lobbyists. We don't vote as a base. And like someone alluded to earlier, the education is just not there.
Yeah. I mean, so I feel a couple ways about that. I feel like, one, I think America asks way too much of black people. I think we always got to be the savior. We're always the savior, and that's not fair. We're the ones who get the brunt of what's going on. on one hand, I think that what we're doing and getting involved is about survival. I think part of the reason why we don't give to lobbyists is because we've been screwed over by lobbyists, right? Who get in power or get what they want and then turn their back on us. And I think they're not even getting that. They're getting worksheets. So you can't even take them to a deeper level of understanding to understand how this system works. And it's by design. Like, they're doing this by design. They don't want you to be an entrepreneur. They want you to work in their factory, right? I think the other part of this, though, is we sometimes get caught up in the big picture. Like, I know there was a lot of my friends personally who they were proud to go out and vote against Trump, but didn't really do anything with the local stuff, right? And all politics is local. So policing, that's local. You need to talk to your mayor, city council. And so I think a lot of times people just don't understand how this system works. They are inclined to believe that they don't contribute or they don't have anything that matters, that their vote doesn't matter, which blows my mind. So I'm like, do you realize how much money these people drop in campaigns to put advertisements on TV to tell you about what's going on? And you say, my vote doesn't matter. Why would they invest so much, right? So like that part is part of the understanding. But I never want to put more pressure on my people, because we already got tons of people and tons of forces putting pressure. So I would say the way to build power is to start at your house, right? Start at your house, create an environment of education, loving, and learning, and put yourselves in a position, put your kids in a position to understand their role in society, to build something hopefully for your kids so your kid doesn't have to be in a rat race trying to chase somebody else if they don't want to, right? It's all about options. If I can give you options, then you can decide what you want to do in your life when you become of age. And also understanding what your role is. I love to see people take their kids when they go vote. I love it because you show your kids, this is what I'm doing in my part to try to make our society better, right? Ultimately, we've got to have tough discussions even amongst our community, because I don't know how y'all's family are, but my family wasn't really revealing about information. They don't talk about money. They don't talk about how to manage it. They don't talk about how to make it. They don't talk about any of this stuff. It's just expected that you're going to pray and it all works out, right? And that doesn't always work. So I think we have to open up those lines of communication because we know the school system isn't going to do it. I didn't learn how to invest in the stock market until I was 32 years old, right? We got kids, white kids doing this stuff at 15, right? So it's just, we have a lot that we have to do, but I don't expect any one Black person to be the savior. I would just want us to understand what our strengths are and what our weaknesses are, and where you're strong, get with somebody who is weak, and where they are strong, get with you and your weaknesses, and just build coalition and fellowship together. Lastly, I would say, again, I hate to keep emphasizing it, leave America for a little bit, like get out of America and see Black people doing good stuff around the world, and refresh your mind to realize that you are here for a divine purpose, and nobody can take that divine purpose away from you. So when you come back and you're refreshed and you're energized, you'll be able to put up with all the crap. The reason America wants you to feel bad is because America makes nothing. We made America. We made everything. We built Washington, D.C. We built the banking industry. We built the insurance industry because they were insuring the slave ships. We built it. So what they've been trying to do is to hold on to the power that they never should have had in the first place, right, by making life difficult for us. And the sad part is I have seen some of the most talented Black people in the world who have to settle for much less than what they deserve because life is set up so that you got to pay your bills. You got to eat. You got to do this. We get overlooked in job interviews because of who our name is or what we look like. And it's people who could really be Fortune 500 company CEOs, right? But we end up playing that role in order to take care of the necessaries. So imagine a world where your kid, when they become an adult, doesn't have to take care of the necessaries. It's already covered, right? So now if you want to say, hey, I'm going to start a Fortune 500 company, there's nothing stopping you, right? So I just feel like that's where we have to be. I don't want anybody to be stressed anymore. I think we got plenty, right? So I'm ready for people to look at success markers and work together to get where we want to be.
All right. So we have a question. He said, "Are you optimistic that we can change the system?" I know when I look out, and especially at things that are happening now, um, I know growing up in New York, like I didn't experience, I could say really any racism. I even spent a year at an all white school. It was three black kids in the whole school. And I was just, the black girl in school. Like it wasn't, I didn't feel ostracized, because I was black. I guess in a way it was a little off because, people were very fascinated with me. I guess because, I was the new black girl. But I didn't experience a lot of, I'll say, derogatory type things growing up. So when I look at things that are happening now and I'm over 40 and I think about some of the things, that other relatives may have endured in the past, like I'm scared because I'm like, okay, so what does that mean for my children by the time they're 25? Are they going to be sitting, or 30? Are they going to be scratching their head looking at some of the things, that they're going through, wondering, I wonder if mommy went through this, when they were coming up. So for me, I'm not optimistic that things are gonna change. I mean, I feel like as much as we want to fight for it to change, they're willing to fight for it not to change, which is evident. They're proven they're willing, if that means showing up and shooting you on the spot and coming up with an excuse, it seems like they're comfortable with that. Like, and for me, so like things like that make me scared, and I don't feel very optimistic that we can change the system. But what do you guys think? Are you optimistic that we can make a change in our lifetime? Let's say that. So
we're seeing it. We're seeing change. We're just not seeing a wide range of it, but absolutely, we're seeing change. The verdict was a piece of change that we just saw. You know what I'm saying? And there's other laws. New York getting rid of qualified immunity. That's change. That would never have happened unless there was tons of pressure placed on New York. We're seeing change. I think a part of the problem with us is instant gratification. We like instant food. We like instant gratification. And when you don't get it, it almost feels like nothing's happening. But oh yes, we are definitely seeing change. I'm optimistic that we'll continue to see change. Equality? No. I am not optimistic that we will see equality in my lifetime, but change will continue to come because we're fed up. We're fed up.
I agree. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think every generation has their cross to bear, right? And so before, when we couldn't vote, people had to sacrifice so that we wouldn't have that hurdle to get over. I would push back. I mean, I know you said that you didn't experience any racism, maybe not overtly, but I know in New York, they were taking people property or redlining. They were taking people property away. And so there are things that were happening in boardrooms and banks and government offices that, the whole time. The thing for me is I just feel like we're never going to be able to control everything because the system wasn't designed for us, right? Our change looks incremental because it took so much work to get the incremental change that we got. And one of the frustrations that I have as an attorney is seeing how this system continues to take advantage. I look at situations where we had to galvanize to tell the world that Black lives should matter in a place, in a country where Black equity should matter, right? So we're fighting for, in my opinion, the bare minimum to say just recognize that our children should be able to live, where we really should own market share in this country because it's owed to us, right? And so because we know that, and because we understand that the powers that be don't want to allow that to happen, we've got a couple options. You can try to dethrone the powers that be. And I always preach that and step away because I'm not preaching violence, but I will say when rich people were taking advantage of poor people in France, what did the poor people do? They got the guillotine, right? Like that's what they did. When rich people were taking advantage of poor people in Russia, what did they do? They got rid of them, right? That's just the way that it works. Ultimately, in America, we've created safeguards to protect affluence. So there's tax codes, there's criminal laws, there's everything to protect affluence. It doesn't mean that we need to go out and grab our guns and destroy everything. What it means is that if we're going to work in this system, we have to change the narrative to how do we make the system work for us, right? And I think you do that by increased participation. I think you do that in being knowledgeable about what is going on in your area and combating to fix it. So in my area, we have an eviction crisis. We, for a long time, didn't have anybody dealing with it. Black people just getting evicted left and right for any reason, and there was nothing anybody could do about it. So we said, okay, let's put some resources together and fight against it. People need to be able to stay in their homes and not have an eviction on their record that's going to screw them from being able to ever go elsewhere, right? But evictions alone weren't the answer. It's also educating people on home ownership. So we've also got people who are paying over, $1,400, $1,500 a month in North Carolina, which is unheard of here. I know New York is different, but in North Carolina is unheard of. And I'm like, well, that's past mortgage prices at that point, right? So maybe it's the issue of let's educate you on how to get a mortgage and how to get a place. And then you don't have to worry about anybody evicting you. You just keep up with your payments. So it's everything. It's real estate, it's business, it's politics, it's education. But again, the point is that we won't be able to have an influence on the power brokers in the system, but we can have an influence on the system.
Okay. Ladies, are you optimistic that we can change the system?
Katrina.
Right.
I mean, I feel like there are when laws are being passed, it's all fine and good, but then in the application and implementation of the law, that's where I'm not optimistic, because we'll have laws on the books, but then when it comes down to, okay, I'm coming for my interview to get hired, and yes, there's no discrimination that's supposed to happen, but you're looking across from me and be like, no, I'm not gonna hire you. You don't have to give me a reason. And that's where the change is not happening.
Right.
Because the law is there, but I'm still not getting hired. So that's, you can't change people's hearts and minds and feelings and their prejudice and racism, even though the law is on the book. So to that end, I'm not that optimistic.
Okay. Shanetta?
So I'm always one that tries to stay optimistic in all situations. So I'm going to go with yes. I do feel like we could see change. I do feel like things could be different. I do think it could happen in my lifetime, not just in the lifetime of my kids and grandkids and, so on and so forth. I do think we could see it. I think it's a matter of, and it's so interesting because for me, I'm in the midst of teaching about the history of America right now in my classroom. And every week, these conversations get more and more interesting because it gives me more fuel and more ammunition for the kids when I go back into the classroom, but I have to kind of break it down to their level. But I think that it's important to teach kids history. And if you would have talked to me 2 months ago, when I first started studying to teach the lessons that I'm teaching now, I was like, I don't want to teach this. This doesn't seem like something I should be teaching 8th graders. But what I've learned in this process is that it's important to teach them the true history of America, to teach them that racism still exists, to teach them that while you may not be racist and while your best friend may not be racist, there are people out there who simply don't like you because of the color of your skin. There are people who go to school with you whose parents are teaching them not to like you.
That's right. That's right.
So I think that in teaching our children history, in teaching them the true history, in understanding and acknowledging that history ourselves, it helps us to kind of see where we fall and where we are and what kind of work we need to do. And then while we can't do everything, while we cannot, take on the masses of all the things that needs to be fixed, we have to pick some things that we can work with and work with those things, work within those means. I may be working on one thing, Tangela may be working on another thing, Katrina may be working on something else, Samantha may be working on something else, Taiwan and Jay on something different, but we're all working for the same cause, but it's in different ways. So I feel like
that's a system.
Right. Organizing, getting together,
Right.
and each of us doing our part is what creates that change for us.
Yes.
It's what makes things better, and being consistent, because today, the verdict just came out last week, and I'm on fire, I'm ready to go, I'm ready to do stuff, and then a month from now I'm like, wait, what was I supposed to be doing? Oh yeah, I'm a part of this group, okay, let me go back. And we wait until the next big thing happens before we go back and do something, when we need to be working when maybe something isn't necessarily in the media as big as George Floyd's case or Derek Chauvin's case. Now let's not call it George Floyd's case, but as big as that trial, we kind of forget to work when those things fall in the background, and we forget the goal of what we were supposed to be doing. We have to be consistent, and I think that's how we see change.
Okay, Tangela.
You're muted.
I'm kind of like Shanetta. I am optimistic, and a part of my optimism is this particular generation. I'm optimistic because to quote a rapper from my time, these are some no limit soldiers, and I'm seeing it from across the demographics. When I'm looking at the protests, I'm seeing young people from not just Black people protesting. That gives me some level of hope, because these young people are being impacted by the events of this time. They're seeing the racism. They've heard the conversations, the innuendos, and the jokes that their parents and grandparents have said. But when they're watching and they're experiencing injustice on so many different levels, I think they're being impacted by it. And these young people are going to grow up, they're going to go to school, and prayerfully, they will continue to carry the impact of what they've experienced with them, and that will drive them to do something to instill and impact change.
Okay, and he said, okay, last comment. Well, somebody tell AD he does not run my show. He runs the Brothers of Legacy. But I think he's asking, do you feel we can change people's biases?
I don't think we can change bias, because that's something internal, but I think we can challenge. I think we can ask people to, reflect and be self-aware, but I don't know if we can't reach into someone's spirit and change them, but we can, shine a light on a better way, or at least have them challenge, why those biases exist.
I think one of the things that will affect people's biases, for example, when George Floyd, when he was passing away, called out for his mom, and that affected so many mothers,
Right.
white, Black, whatever color. And so when there's something that's relatable, that's across the board, that's one thing I think that helps to change people's biases, when they say, listen, I'm a mom regardless. And that's something that, will start, like Tangela was saying, start to open up people's minds and hearts about just humanity.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm trying to work on my own biases. I definitely can't change someone else's. I mean,
That's true.
I do have my own biases that I'm literally working on regularly. Coming from where I'm from, where Samantha and AD are from as well. It was all Black, and we had a few Spanish people there as well, but it was mostly Black people. And now where I live now is North Shore, Long Island, where it's
Ooh.
mostly white. So
Right.
I had to go from almost like opposite ends of the spectrum. I literally have like white kids spending the night at my house every other weekend, or my daughter spending the night at her white friend. So I had to work on my own biases, and I'm still a work in progress in that area. And it's not hard. I mean, I'm sorry, it's not easy. It's extremely hard for me because I spent 40 years in one environment and then 4 years in another. I'm still getting used to it. I'm still getting used to the sleepovers, the transporting different people back and forth here and there, and the wife. Sorry, that's my door. But go ahead.
So I just want to say, Tawan, I commend you for being able to admit that. Like the town I live in, a few of my neighbors are black, and then a bunch of them are white. So we live in a mixed area, and the school is a lot of white kids. And my daughter, she, of course, the first little friend she wanted to bring home was this little Caucasian girl. And it was Emma this and Kim, and I have to say, I wasn't willing to let her spend the night at Emma's house. But I did let Emma, I would let her come here and spend the night, and hang out with my daughter. I was not brave enough, but my daughter's small, in my defense, she's little. So I wasn't, to the point where I was willing to let her go there. But I had the little girl over, and I would invite her to, like the kids' party and stuff. And to see the faces of grown black people when they see the little white girl come to
Yes.
play,
Yes.
I'm like, really? Like, they're like, what's she doing here? I'm like, it was so amazing to me to see people respond that way. So I have to commend you, for being brave enough to say that out loud, because most people, they don't have the courage to be honest. Like
Uh,
it is hard
it's
to
hard.
to get over your own self. Like I can't be helping you over here, and I have my own self, my own stuff to deal with. So I definitely commend you with that, and it definitely is a process. Like I said, to go from having white neighbors, and I said last week I got that one extra neighbor. She real extra. Like she be complaining about my dog barking on this block, and she lived up
On another
round.
block.
Like I mean, she called the people. Like, and they showed up like your dog barks too much. What? Like, so when you experience things like that, I'm just like, that's a lot. So sometimes it is hard to deal with your own biases. I'll say I don't think you can change anybody, but I believe in the if you see something, say something. So like for me, when I see something that like don't sit right or whatever, I have to say something. Like, I feel like we, sometimes we should speak up more often, when things are out of whack or when things are wrong. I think we definitely should speak up. But yeah, I don't believe we can change anybody. But I think the more you work on yourself and the more you change yourself, um, it kind of filters out into your surroundings.
Yeah.
Lady,
I got a neighbor. Well, I got two neighbors. The way the house is situated, we have two neighbors. Um, been here about 13 and a half years. I spoke to one time when a tree fell on his property, and the other one never said a word. 13 and a half years, not a single word. Yeah, I've never done anything. I try to, when we first moved, try to say, hey, how you doing? Didn't get no response. Maybe she ain't here. Next day, same thing. You walking your dog. Oh, that's a nice dog. What is that, a boxer? Nothing. So I'm like, okay, I see what this is. 13 and a half years. And this one lady, she lives by herself, just her and her dog. And she lives in a huge house, a huge house. She's never said a word. You would think she would be friendly just in case something happens.
right?
You know, not a single word, 13 and a half years.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a long time.
It's a long time, and I've extended the olive branch a couple of times. Like I said, the other one we've spoke a couple of times. He was nice when I helped him remove a tree that fell on his property. He owned an organic farm. He bought some fruit and vegetables over afterwards. He was nice, but he just moved last week.
Oh,
But 13 and a half years, we probably only had 4 or 5 brief conversations.
wow. Yeah, and I think that's so unfortunate.
It adds to the
Sometimes
bias. It's
so unfortunate. Like, I think on both ends, sometimes it's like you're missing out on a great, I can be a resource for you.
Right.
Maybe not, you never know, what little thing that you might need somebody for that I can help you out. So those biases can definitely come back and bite you in the behind.
Right.
Ladies, did you want to add something?
I would say that last week, the guest that we had last week has me encouraged to go and meet my neighbors. I know some of them, and we're like in a Facebook group together because like we have a neighborhood HOA Facebook. But he has me really encouraged to kind of know the people better around me. And even listening to Taiwan, I'm like, yeah, I need to get out in this neighborhood and start talking to these people more because we've been here too long to not know these people. And the one guy, we knew his name. We actually knew his name and everything. And we him all the time. He moved. So I got to go meet these new people.
You should.
Listen, just be careful. Last night, my neighbor, the black neighbor, he knocked on my door at midnight.
Oh, he's bugging. He's bugging.
He knocked on the door at midnight, and Anthony was like, "What? Somebody at the door!" Like, because it's dark down here at night. He was looking for his girlfriend's dog.
You better have a butcher knife sticking out of your eyeball. Knocking on my door.
Man, the dog ain't in here.
And it seemed like he was drunk too. Like, so he's like knocking, and I said, well, "Who is it?" It's your neighbor. I said, "What you want?" It's your neighbor. What do you want? Like, what makes you think I'm opening my door at midnight? Like, he's like, "Oh, the guy with the bulldogs." Okay, again, what do you want? It's midnight. You're looking for a dog. So yeah, getting to know your neighbors. It's I don't know if it's really working out for me or not. I'm getting a little bit on both sides, but it is good to know the people around you. Trina, any last words?
I'm good.
All right. So thank you guys so much. I think this was a great conversation. I have thoroughly enjoyed Jay having you on in Taiwan. Oh man, you made my night. So thank you guys so much for coming on and being a part. I have truly enjoyed this.
Let me just say, it was my life's mission to be in one of these squares at some point. I definitely feel complete. And the brother's legacy never invited me on, so
that's right.
I ain't gonna do it to the brothers.
Call them out.
Not gonna do it to the brothers. But thank you for having me.
You need to call him out. AD is watching. He's somewhere. Well, I think he got mad after I talked about his comment. He might have got mad because he didn't say nothing else. Right. You need to call him out. The brothers of legacy. Tell them don't do
the legacy. I be in the gym every morning watching the show. Never invited me on. Sisters got me right in the box.
Listen, because you'll be in the comments, and sometimes your comments, I'm like, I need to have them on. It ain't the same.
I'm better in the comments though. This was a bit much.
Hold on, there we go. So thank you guys. All my viewers will be back next Tuesday at 8:30. Gentlemen, just hold tight. I'm gonna close out, and you can't come in here on my show. I'm still live.
You remember that?
Oh man!
All right, guys.
All right then.
Have a good night.
Appreciate y'all.
I can't believe you did that. Oh, where is my thing? Okay.